Well, hey everybody, we are right in the middle of our series called Your New Playlist. And we're talking about tapping into the superpower of a mindset and choosing wisdom when it comes to your thoughts. But before we dive into the lesson for today, I want to spend some time talking with you about my biggest fear that I had as a kid. Now, maybe for some of you, you've seen or you've heard about the movie Jaws. Now, even though this movie came out before I was born, I did see it when I was a child. And this was an obviously terrifying movie about a shark, but it was even more frightening for me when I watched it because I was a child. And I don't remember what exactly it was that was so traumatizing about it, but I do remember that there was a shark that did all kinds of things in the movie that a shark wouldn't normally do in real life. But I didn't know that as a kid. And I also didn't know that sharks only lived in the ocean. And so near my house, there was a reservoir, and we would go out there with our friends, and we would go swimming and boating and tubing and all these different things. But after I watched this movie, there was always a fear that I had as we would go out on the reservoir because you couldn't see the bottom. And there was a part of me that, especially when we got out towards the middle on a boat, that I would always look down and I would just be waiting on Jaws to come out of the water and eat me as a tasty snack. You see, while that sounds a little funny and a little far-fetched, the reality is we all know what it's like to be afraid of something. But have you ever wondered, well, is there a way to get over my fears? Is there a way to remove fear from my life forever? Can we become so consistently brave that we'll never experience fear again? Can we truly be, like Taylor Swift says, fearless? Now, unfortunately, I'm not so sure that we can ever get completely rid of fear. Now, sure, your fears today are probably not the same that they were when you were a child. Like maybe you're not scared of clowns or bugs or things like that anymore, but that doesn't mean that fear is gone altogether. Because for most of us, the old fears that we now look back and we kind of laugh about and think are funny have been replaced by new, bigger fears as we've grown up. Because now that you're in high school, your fears come in a different form. Like you start to worry about specific classes, or you start to worry about a parent who maybe lost their job, or you worry about making the team at school. And so many people go through life and they try to pretend to be fearless. They try to walk through life as if fear isn't real. And if it is real, well, they say, well, it's not that big of a deal, or they act like it's not that big of a deal. And maybe people are really good at pretending to be fearless at times, but the reality is none of us can really escape it forever. Because the more we try, the harder it gets to escape it. And while you can ignore fear for a little bit, or maybe you can downplay it for a while, or maybe you can even attempt to kind of push through it, eventually fear will show back up. And just like that, it's all that you hear, all that you think about, and all that you feel. Because fear has a way of changing the playlist in our minds. And here's the thing, is when we let fear take over our thoughts, it leads us down a path of endless questions, of thinking to ourselves, what if? What if I don't make friends? What if my parents get divorced? What if I fail the test? What if my loved one doesn't get better? Or what if the world doesn't get better? You see, this one's kind of tricky because here's the thing. When we talk about fear, people typically say, I want to avoid it. But fear can sometimes be helpful because sometimes the what if questions can help us to avoid or be cautious around things that could potentially hurt us. And that's not a bad thing at all. But the problem comes when we let fear take over, when it becomes the boss of our actions, of our thoughts, and of our lives. When it holds us back from trying new things or discovering good things, that's when we need to figure out how do we try to turn the volume down on fear. And that's why we need a new playlist. Now, one of the best things about the Bible is that it gives us examples of real people who had real experiences and real feelings just like you and I. Now, some of Jesus' closest followers, they actually had an encounter with him that taught them how to deal with fear. And it can do the same for you and I today. You see, while he was on earth, Jesus spent the majority of his time with a group of his 12 closest friends. And because they spent so much time together with Jesus, they got to see him do some pretty amazing things. They got to see him heal sick people and forgive sins and do miracles and all of these really amazing things that he could do. And you'd think that because these guys were Jesus' closest friends, that they had nothing to fear. After all, they were hanging out with the guy who had the power to do literally anything. So what could they possibly be afraid of when they have Jesus by their side? Well, one night they're out on a boat with Jesus and a huge storm rolls in. And the waves were so high, they were literally sweeping over the boat. And in the moment of just absolute chaos and fear, these guys did exactly what I think you and I would do. They looked for Jesus. They looked for the guy that they thought could definitely help calm their fears. And here's what happens. It says, suddenly a ferocious storm came upon the lake, so the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples woke him and saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. So in the moment where all these waves, and this isn't just a minor rainstorm, the waves are literally about to capsize the boat that they're on. Their lives are in danger. And in this moment, what is Jesus doing? He's taking a nap. Now, obviously, the disciples were afraid. They were in the middle of the water riding out this major storm. And the one person who could stop it was resting his eyes while the waves were crashing in all around them. And when they finally got Jesus awake, they probably thought, okay, this is the moment. He's going to step in and save us, which is spoiler alert, he does. But before he saves them, he had something to say. And here's what he says. He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and waves obey him." Now, while I can't be completely sure, because obviously I wasn't there, I don't think Jesus made that statement, "You of little faith," to the disciples because he was upset with them. I don't think he was trying to make them feel bad for not having enough faith that they'd be safe. I think he was trying to show them something, that even when they're afraid, their faith in the one who is bigger than anything that they might fear is actually stronger and louder and there to help them face their fears. Their faith in God and in Jesus is stronger and louder and present to help you face your fears. Now, yes, Jesus calms the storm, but not only the one raging on the waters. You see, Jesus calms the storm in his followers. He calms their fears, not just by stopping the wind and the waves, but by showing them that fear is loud, but it is a liar. Fear is loud, but it is a liar. And why is that true? Because Jesus is bigger than what we're afraid of. Jesus is bigger than what we're afraid of. Now, did the disciples have a reason to be afraid? Of course they did. They were on the water in the middle of a huge storm, and it was scary. It was terrifying. But Jesus wanted them to know that their fear didn't have to be the only thing that they felt. It didn't have to be the only voice that they listened to on the water. It didn't have to be the only song on their playlist. Because his voice and his presence can play even louder. Because remember, fear is loud, but it is a liar. And with Jesus, we can actually turn the volume down on fear. Now, while we may not be facing a literal storm at sea, we've all experienced fear, right? We felt afraid or alone or out of control, just like the disciples did in the boat in that moment. But in the same way that Jesus was with them, he is with you and I today. So we can trust him in the middle of the storm. We can turn to his presence and to his power when we're afraid. Now, will we still have reasons to be afraid in life? Of course we will. That's just a part of life. And I'm not saying that following Jesus means that you'll never fear again. But I am saying that he can help you walk through your fear. He can help you turn the volume down on your fear. Now, we all understand the concept of a light switch, hopefully. That when you flip it up, it turns things on, and when you turn it, flip it down, it turns things off. And that's what we want when we're afraid. We want a magical switch to make things go away. But like we said earlier, sometimes fear can be helpful. It can help us keep alert and safe. And so we don't want to flip a switch and never feel fear. So to help us illustrate this today, I have a box fan here with me. And many of you know how these work, that if you simply turn, the dial on the top, it cranks up the speed of the fan. And instead, we need to think of fear like a dial. And a dial doesn't always turn things off, but it does turn things down. Because when we turn the dial down on fear, we're not shutting it out completely. But literally what we're doing is we're simply not giving it the loudest voice. So when it's on at its highest volume, it creates a lot of noise. But when we turn it down, we're simply not giving it the loudest volume. Now, yes, difficult things will still show up in our lives, and things will still happen that are scary, and fear will still creep in and hang out. You might not be able to turn it down, but when fear takes over your thoughts like an annoying song stuck on your head, you can turn the dial down. And you say, okay, that's great, but how do I do that? Well, one thing you can do is you can focus on what's true. So instead of letting your mind wander to a million what ifs, you can focus on what is. You can focus on the truth that you find in Scripture that reminds you that God is with you and God is for you in every fear that you face. Take this psalm, for example, Psalm 23, verse 4, that says, even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. Focus on that for just a second. When we walk through dark times, you don't have to be afraid because God is with you. And I don't know about you, but when I find myself in the middle of life in a storm on dark waters, this is a truth that I want to remember. And my challenge to you this week is to memorize this verse. Let it be a place that you start when it comes to facing fear. Because remember, fear is loud, but it is a liar. And maybe you need a little bit of help talking about or identifying what it is that you're afraid of. Maybe the fear, is really loud and you need somebody to encourage you to trust in Jesus in the middle of it. And if so, we encourage you to find a trusted adult, a parent, one of your friends' parents, or maybe if you join us here in person, a small group leader. Because these are the people who want to help you walk through circumstances or situations that may be causing you to fear. These are individuals that are here to help remind you that even if your circumstances don't change, you can walk through them with absolute confidence and faith in Jesus because He is in control of it all. He is in control of it all. Well, thank you so much for checking out part 3 of our series, Your New Playlist. We hope that it's been helpful and encouraging to you as we've wrestled with this idea of fear and how when we feel fears that it can overtake and it can control us. But sometimes fear can be helpful and it can help us avoid dangerous situations. But when we let it overtake our lives and it consumes us, we tend to not focus on the thing that can actually get us through our fears, which is our faith and our hope in Jesus. And if you don't know who Jesus is, we encourage you to talk to a trusted adult, give the church a call, send me a text or an email. We'd be more than happy to connect with you because we want you to know who Jesus is, because we believe that He can help you through your fears. And we'd also love to help you do that if you join us in person. We meet on Sunday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. in the youth room at New Hope Church. We'd love to have you join us because you get to connect with adults and other like-minded students who are trying to figure out this thing we call life. So again, we hope that this message has been helpful to you, and we hope that you remember that while fear may be loud, it is a liar, and Jesus is stronger than your fear. Have a great and wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you soon.